The evolution of Zara Larsson's style. If there's one pop star who the public just can't seem to get enough of right now, it's Zara Larsson. And while some might think that her rise to the top of the charts came out of nowhere, anyone paying attention knows that she's been hustling for over a decade, which is quite impressive considering she's only 28. Like most musicians, Zara's clothing has been a reflection not only of her professional ventures, but her personal life and public image. And when you take a look at her wardrobe, it not only highlights the difficulties of finding your footing in such a fickle industry, but how striking the right balance between creativity and commerciality can make or break your career. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the evolution of Zara Larsson's style over the course of her career, from her simple Swedish beginnings, to her brief stint in the Kia Asylum, to the Midnight Sun rebrand that is a masterclass in 21st century marketing. Let's get into it. Zara Maria Larsson was born on December 16, 1997 in Stockholm, Sweden, and by the time she was 10 years old, she was already a household name in her home country, winning the Swedish version of Got Talent in 2008 with a cover of Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On, which was later released as her debut single. She spent the next few years in the public eye with appearances on various television programs, maintaining her fan base and growing her confidence on stage. Motivated by these early successes, in 2010, she and her manager made a trip to Los Angeles to pitch her to major labels, but they passed, citing her age. They returned home, and Zara signed with Swedish indie label 10 in 2012, releasing a handful of EPs over the next couple of years that performed decently across Scandinavia. In an attempt to build up her international recognition, she went out on the road as an opening act for Cher Lloyd, sharing the bill with Fifth Harmony, which is a lineup so of its time that it almost feels like a joke. Her debut album, One, followed in October 2014, and although it went platinum in Sweden, it made very little noise elsewhere. From her music videos alone, you could tell that she wasn't working with the biggest budget, something that carried over to her public appearances and performances, with Zara wearing whatever was generically trendy for her age demographic at the time, like skinny jeans, crop tops, and heeled sneakers. It wasn't offensive, but it wasn't memorable either. And in an industry where your visuals are just as important as the music, that's a real problem. You could just tell that her label wasn't quite sure what to do with a 16-year-old, caught in the awkward in-between where she was too old for the Disney kids, but too young to resonate with the club crowd. Her international breakthrough came in June 2015 with the release of Lush Life, which charted across Europe and Australia, and suddenly made Zara Larsson a name worth knowing. Although Zara was a decade her junior, comparisons were quickly drawn to Rihanna, both lyrically and sonically, which is quite the compliment. Visually, however, the two couldn't have been more different. If you've seen my video on Rihanna's style evolution, you'll know that even when working with a limited budget, she had a pretty distinct look from the get-go. Zara, by contrast, was dressed like every other up-and-coming teenager. Think Kendall Jenner, Chloe Grace Moretz, Hailey Steinfeld, or Camila Cabello. It was a touch edgier than what she'd been wearing before Lush Life, with the addition of bomber jackets, chokers, and Vans, but it wasn't a look that said anything about her or her music. She was also a devoted champion of the top knot, a trend from that era that plagued male and female celebrities alike, and one I'm personally in no rush to see return. What I do find genuinely charming about this period is that Zara got braces right in the middle of it. In America, most young stars quietly opt for invisible orthodontia, and honestly, I think that's part of why so many of them end up being positioned as older than they are. But Zara's braces made it completely impossible to mistake her for anything other than a kid, and the contrast between how young she looked and how self-assured she acted became a huge part of her public image, with a lot of her early coverage leaning heavily on the talented teenager angle. With not enough material for a full album yet, her label set her on a features path, and over the next 2 years she lent her voice to Tiny Tempa, David Guetta, Ty Dolla $ign, and Clean Bandit, keeping her name in circulation while the next project slowly came together. Her clothing started to get a touch more experimental during this stretch, with her team testing out what a signature Zara Larsson aesthetic could look like, while also being influenced by the styles of the people that she was working with. They played around with shades of pink, metallics, and denim, all of which nodded to her female-leaning demographic and the media's ongoing preoccupation with her youth. They also never let anyone forget that Lush Life was her big hit, with some of her performance looks literally having the phrase written on them, a choice I personally didn't love since it made everything look like it came straight off of a Forever 21 clearance rack. For public appearances, they leaned into a more glamorous look, with a lot of black creeping in to subtly signal that she was edging towards her 20s, which was a pretty sharp deviation from the more colorful looks that she wore on stage. With Zara looking like a totally different person from one day to the next, this created a pretty disconnected brand image, which wound up becoming a problem. Most casual listeners make snap judgments on the music based on what the artists themselves look like, and with Zara's clothing not really saying anything, it didn't inspire a lot of organic interest. So Good was finally released in March 2017 and sold significantly better than its predecessor, a testament to 2 years of well-placed features and never-ending performances. But the work wasn't over yet, and Zara embarked on the So Good World Tour that October, spending the better part of the following year on the road. Although Zara had started working on her third album shortly after the release of her second, it was struggling to get off the ground. As every musician knows, the longer you take between projects, the more likely it is that your listeners will move on to the next big thing. And once you've lost that momentum, it's tough to get it back. Zara's first new single, Ruin My Life, performed decently when it was released in 2018, but the album itself was nowhere close to being finished, and it seemed as though Zara and the people she was working with were unsure what direction to go in. I think that part of the issue was all of the guest features she continued to be a part of. While they gave her profile a temporary boost, promoting them also meant having to deprioritize her own projects. So instead of being able to move forward, she was just treading water. Then the pandemic arrived and halted everything completely. And by the time Poster Girl finally came out in March 2021, her last genuine cultural moment had been Lush Life 6 full years earlier. And it showed. Throughout the late 2010s and into the early 2020s, her visuals had no clear narrative, just an aimless collection of ruffles and sparkles and feathers. There was no sense of Zara's personality or artistry coming through in her clothing, and even worse, it didn't even feel trendy. It was like she was following a pop star paint-by-numbers kit that was released half a decade earlier. So for an audience that was already starting to wane, there was nothing to grab their attention.
It's a mess, and I have a lot of those moments.
Poster Girl performed respectably in the UK and across Europe, but it failed to chart in the US, and her planned comeback tour was heavily scaled back as a result. It was a discouraging outcome for an artist with her talent, and it raised questions about what she was capable of versus what was actually being delivered. Perhaps because of the lukewarm reception to the album, in 2022 she made the decision to leave her label after a decade and launched her own, Summer House, which gave her a level of creative control she hadn't previously had access to. You could see the change almost immediately, namely in the turnaround of her next singles, which no longer sat in limbo for years on end. And for the first time in her career, the visuals were finally starting to reflect the direction of the album. Now, these outfits weren't groundbreaking, but there was at least some sense of intentionality, with Zara sporting cargo pants and baby tees alongside beaded bustiers and bedazzled briefs. It was like if the Love Goddess was really into hip-hop. We've seen TikTok breathe new life into an artist's back catalog before, like Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights, Connie Francis's Pretty Little Baby, Doechie's Anxiety, and in late 2024, it happened to Zara when her 2017 song, Symphony, became a viral meme format, appearing alongside Lisa Frank-inspired dolphins and depressing captions.
Can you explain what's going on with dolphins and Symphony?
No, I can't.
Zara, who has openly described herself as chronically online, saw these videos. While she admitted that she was confused by it at first, she quickly embraced the social media moment, which was perhaps the best thing she'd ever done. Having learned from the Poster Girl fiasco, she went straight into the studio and began recording, leaning into a breezy, beachy sound that was deliberately reminiscent of Lush Life, the song that had introduced her to the world in the first place. After a handful of singles, her fifth album, Midnight Sun, was released in September 2025 and immediately captured the public's imagination in a way that none of her other work had been able to. At the same time, she was opening for the US leg of Tate McRae's Miss Possessive tour, which put her in front of a massive audience who either didn't remember the artist behind Lush Life or were simply too young to have been there the first time around. But with Zara singing and dancing her heart out every single night, she soon found a legion of new fans, both online and offline. And I already know someone in the comments is going to say that she was never unknown, maybe only to Americans, but Google search trends don't lie. And outside of Sweden, her visibility had been in steady decline from around 2017 onwards before this moment finally reversed the trajectory. Although her outfits during the Venus era had their fair share of 2000s influences, she turned those references all the way up for Midnight Sun, taking direct inspiration from the girly, sun-drenched aesthetic of the symphony meme. There were sparkly bikini tops, keychain skirts, airbrushed crop tops, and slouchy boots. Everything came in neon colors, and wherever they could put a rhinestone, they did. Now, if someone had pitched this concept to me, I would have had questions. After all, the coconut girl, Malibu Barbie, Key West kitten aesthetic had peaked back in 2021, and the internet had since moved on to indie sleaze, office siren, clean girl, and bloatcore. But Zara's take on the look was not only fun and fresh, but felt like an authentic representation of her bubbly personality.
And I have things to say, and I have things to show, and like create a world around it, and now people get to step into it, and it feels really, really fun.
She said herself that she isn't naturally the most fashion-forward person, so I think it's worth acknowledging how much of this era's success belongs to the creatives around her. Her stylist, Katarina Ospina, has been instrumental in building the Midnight Sun world, sourcing archive couture pieces and commissioning custom work from up-and-coming designers. Makeup artist Sophia Sano, who has been working with Zara for several years, joined the tour for the first time in 2025 and is credited for taking a bold approach to her glam that adds to the outfits, never detracts from them. The hard work of every team member has resulted in not only some of the most original stage ensembles I've seen in years, but a visual brand identity that has seamlessly carried over into music videos, red carpets, and photo shoots. A key part of what makes Zara's looks work is that scalability. They're designed to look good at every angle and from any distance, whether you're watching her from the other side of the stadium or swiping through pictures on your phone. One of the markers I always come back to when thinking about whether an artist has truly made it is whether someone could dress up as them and have people get it immediately. That's why having a distinctive look is so important, and why stars like Madonna, Elvis, Cher, Michael Jackson, or Selena have a permanent place in the Music Hall of Fame and the shelves of Spirit Halloween. While Zara's talent has been undeniable, there was no visual signature that was hers and hers alone. The Midnight Sun era has genuinely changed that, and Zara Larsson finally looks like the pop star she was always meant to be. As for what comes next, I have to wonder. If she stays in the summery 2000s aesthetic, she runs the risk of boring the fickle music fandom. But if she pivots too sharply, she could lose the audience she's worked so hard to get back. What do you think of Zara Larsson's Midnight Sun era? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!